while I was really comfortable talking about my kids' ADHD, I didn't talk about mine. Part of this journey is kind of normalizing and making it okay to talk about these things. And thankfully, more and more women are willing to talk about it because it impacts every bit of your life.
You're like, and that's when I formed the support group. I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah. I love that you're recognizing the small beginnings because they do make a big difference. You may not even realize at the time, but they're huge for people who have ADHD.
Today on the podcast, we have a wonderful guest. We have Jeremy Didier. She is the president of CHADD's board of directors. And for those of you who don't recognize the name, CHADD stands for Children and Adults with ADHD or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, which is the nation's leading nonprofit organization supporting those affected with ADHD. But she has so much more. She's also a coach. She has over 15 years of experience working with children, parents, and adults with ADHD at Impact Parents. And to top it all off, in her personal life, she's the parent to 5 awesome kids, 4 of whom have ADHD. So lots going on. And it's wonderful to have you today, Jeremy.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, it feels like there's never a dull moment here. I mean, we truly have ADHD chaos, organized chaos anyway, like you said.
I can imagine. And yeah, we've been sharing research papers back and forth coming onto this podcast. So we've got so much to talk about. But yeah, I wanted to start with you because you have a very impressive resume. And I was curious about where in your journey you found out you had ADHD.
Great question. I should have known I had ADHD. If you look at my resume, I jump around quite a bit. I was diagnosed when I was 36, and I'm 52 now. Oh my gosh. I'm almost 53 now. And so it's been a while since I was diagnosed, but I was diagnosed like most moms with ADHD and most women with, well, not most, but a lot of parents, I guess, who have kids who have ADHD. When one of their kids gets diagnosed, you kind of start looking at the symptoms and you go, that may be me. And then you get diagnosed then. And so my third child was the first one to be diagnosed with ADHD. And so I was diagnosed right after he was diagnosed, and he was 4 when he was diagnosed. So yeah.
Wow.
And then after that, 3 other kids were diagnosed with ADHD and other comorbidities. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah. What was that like? Sort of, I guess, when you thought, oh, that might be me, was it easy to get the diagnosis at that point? Did it take a while? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, I don't know that this is a good thing, but oddly enough, it was very easy. I don't know if it's because, we already had one family member that had ADHD, or if it was that when I looked at my friends and family and said, what do you guys think? This kind of sounds like me. And they all laughed out loud and said, yeah, duh. So it was very straightforward. And it's funny because one of the things I do now is diagnose adults with ADHD. And I'm a huge champion for getting a full and complete diagnosis and not getting the kind of down and dirty, speedy diagnosis, but that's how I was diagnosed. And, I'm so grateful that things have changed quite a bit. I mean, over time. So that was over 15 years ago that I was diagnosed. And back then, people were just starting to talk about their kids' ADHD and become more comfortable with that. I live in the Midwest in the States. And so we're a little bit behind the times, with some things, not significantly so, but, maybe a year or so behind. And people weren't talking about adult ADHD. And so while I was really comfortable talking about my kids' ADHD, I didn't talk about mine. I was hesitant initially to say that I, took medication for it or that I'd even been diagnosed, and I would just kind of talk around it. So it's really been in the past, I think, 10 and even more so, probably 8 years that I've been much more comfortable. And I feel like at least in my journey and kind of where I live and my circle, it's much more comfortable and much more encouraged, I think, to talk about. But I've never been one to undershare. So I've felt, as you guys know too, part of this journey is kind of normalizing and making it okay to talk about these things. And thankfully, more and more women are willing to talk about it because it impacts every bit of your life. And so things have changed. I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. That's so great. And I agree with you. I actually studied human development and taught human development. And we learned about ADHD, the child diagnosis that you could have. And it was only when I was sitting in a room being, told that I had it that I found out that adults could have it as well.
Right? It's kind of mind-blowing.
It is to look back. Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Yeah, I can be extremely annoying now. I have a nephew that's in medical school, and when he got to the psychiatry portion of his training, I was like, "Tell me how much time they spend on ADHD. I want to hear everything that they teach you and what you learn about it."
Yes,
and it was like less than a page of background information. So there's still a lot of work to do.
Oh, that's like a knife to the chest.
Brutal.
Yeah.
I wanted to pipe in and just share that I also was diagnosed sort of concurrently with my child. We were sort of starting to explore it with the pediatrician, and then I strong-armed my long-term therapist into giving me the assessment. And then he was like, okay, these are pretty high results. I guess I'll just go ahead and give you that diagnosis. So,
Nice.
A lot of parallels here. And I guess we'll see about the next child.
Doesn't mean that all your children are going to have it.
No, for sure.
It becomes one doesn't have it. You're like, what happened to you?
Right. My poor one child that doesn't have it. I can't imagine what I try to ask him every now and then, but I'm not sure I want to hear the answers. If growing up in this household was a nightmare for him, I'm not sure I want to know.
Well, it's like introverts and extroverts, I suppose. Everyone's got differences from their family.
Mm-hmm.
But what made you decide you wanted to support others with ADHD? Because that is a different perspective. And I don't know. I was reading into your background in the Navy, and it was honestly, it was so fascinating. Yeah.
Oh gosh. So I and I tell everyone it was purely self-seeking. I needed people to talk to when my kid was diagnosed and when I was diagnosed, and there wasn't a CHADD chapter anywhere in Kansas or Missouri. And so if you don't know, Kansas City straddles the Kansas and Missouri state line, so it runs right down the middle. So we all kind of think of ourselves as living in both states, but there was no one to talk to, and my normal did not look very much like anybody else's normal. And so, we were dealing with a lot of, emotional dysregulation, some very intense, meltdowns and temper tantrums. And, I was feeling like a pretty bad parent. And so I wanted more people to talk to. And I also wanted to be able to connect with some of the experts in the area so that I'd know who to call if I had questions. And so it kind of started there. My best friend is a pediatrician whose daughter has ADHD. And so we were like, why don't we do this? And we were just in the right place at the right time. And so we started as a support group for parents of kids with ADHD. And over the years, we've evolved into, adding, a group for women with ADHD, a group for teenagers with ADHD, a group for couples where one partner has ADHD, and one that's just for adults with ADHD. And so, there's just so many negative things that can happen, particularly for adults if you're not diagnosed. And you guys know the research on women who don't get diagnosed until later. It's terrifying. And I misdiagnosing my own daughter. I didn't officially diagnose, but I took three of my sons to be diagnosed. And my daughter, like many of us, was able to kind of mask for a long time. And I missed her diagnosis. The pediatrician, the best friend, missed her diagnosis. My psychiatrist missed her diagnosis. And so that really, really lit a fire under me to make sure that we had a resource or at least a way for people to get the help that they needed. When I look at my extended family, and I don't know what your guys' stories look like, but I have no doubt that my parents probably both had some level of ADHD. And so two of my three siblings also had ADHD, and they both found some coping mechanisms that were not very healthy. And I really want to make sure that if there's anyone that I can help get diagnosed sooner rather than later, so they don't have to, struggle with addiction, struggle with the justice system, or struggle with other things, I want to make sure that I can do everything possible to prevent that from happening. And there's a lot of work, like I said, still to be done. But I love, that there's podcasts like yours and organizations like yours that are talking about this and bringing more information to people because it's so needed.
This is super powerful. And I'm feeling really jazzed up for what time of day it is.
I know it's late.
And I'm just dying to know, as I'm sure people who are listening are going to want to know, say in the United States, we call sort of lack of access to healthcare like a healthcare desert. And so if you find yourself living in a place like that, surrounded by parents who are overwhelmed with their children with ADHD, who probably don't even know that they have ADHD yet themselves, like how might we do what you did or get connected with people already doing that thing?
How would you form a support group, or how would you get connected with healthcare providers?
The first one.
Okay.
Yeah. How did you do that? That takes a lot of executive functioning for an ADHD person.
I was gonna ask the same thing because it's you're like, and that's when I formed a support group. I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah.
My friend, the pediatrician, does not have ADHD. And so we have to find, and I don't know if that's the actual secret to it, but I do find that in most successful CHADD chapters and support groups, if one person doesn't have ADHD, you balance each other out. And so, she definitely keeps me on track. And again, CHADD is, actually international, but at the time, they were adding chapters left and right, and they had a lot of online support. And they also gave us the opportunity to kind of do whatever we wanted, which was good, but also we could do whatever we wanted. And so that maybe wasn't so good. But yeah, we just set it up like a business, and we're like, here we are, let's talk about ADHD. And then we'd bring in speakers. And again, I feel like it really was so self-serving. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
So you could look at it that way as sort of self-serving, or you could look at it as helping others as you helped yourself.
Yeah, I like that.
It's sort of like a collaborative process.
Yes, much more positive lens, definitely.
Yeah. And I really love that focus on the small beginnings, because I think, one of the things we talk about here is always about those practical strategies and those small beginnings. They can look very, like you said, it's just a friend, but they start something. And I think it's important to know that, to be able to share that, hey, this small thing that you're doing, it can become something.
Thank you. And I love that you said that, because I think it's important to remember, really, for anyone with ADHD, that our successes often don't look like what maybe, mainstream society would call successes. The fact that my daughter went to school every day and made it there on time and, and graduated, this is a major success for her, and like I said, starting the support group, we had just a couple people come initially, but that was a major success because it was a difficult thing to do, put that together. And so I love that you're recognizing the small beginnings, because they do make a big difference. You may not even realize at the time, but they're huge for people who have ADHD.
Definitely. Hi, Sky here, just popping in with a quick strategy for you. As some of you might know, we've recently launched the Goals Achieved with ADHD Academy, and some of our members kindly agreed to have their sessions recorded so that I could share them with you. So what you're about to hear is a snippet of a strategy that Amani and I worked on to help her with her goal of getting a job. So hopefully you'll find this strategy helpful, and if you'd like to talk with me about how you can achieve your goals with ADHD, just click the description below to book a free 15-minute focus session, and we'll get started together.
How do we beat that procrastination, rejection sensitivity cycle around this incredibly complicated, incredibly rejection sensitive thing?
Applying for a job brings up so much in me. I'm giving myself these deadlines, which are my kryptonite. If I were anybody else, I would be like, it is not a big deal. What matters is that you get them out.
There's different parts of applications in general. Some of them are rejection sensitive, some of them aren't. We need to divide tasks into things that are stressful and things that are not stressful. Do the more relaxed bits, and then we're going to get a bunch of dopamine and chunk together all of the stressful bits and do those together. We want to separate the writing the application self and the sending the application self. How do you feel about the strategy? Are you happy with that as a thing to try?
Yes.
Cool.
Very, 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 very excited about it. That sounds great.
Speaking of small beginnings and sort of leading to things, I'm so curious, how did you come to be the president of CHADD's board of directors? That was pretty recent. Like, what was that journey?
I'm not sure you want to hear the answer. Everybody else said no.
Such a neurodiverse answer to that question.
Right. I even said no. I said no like 6 times.
So what is that? Because I mean, I've been connected with CHADD, and I know a lot of people have, or they've seen it. Yeah. There's these big support services. What is sort of going on in these organizations? Like, what is it? There must be a lot of information coming your way, a lot of meetings. I'd love to know kind of like what is involved in running one of these big organizations from your perspective, and then what are some of the strategies you use to manage what I imagine is quite a lot of information coming your way?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there is quite a bit of information, as you can imagine. And CHADD is fortunate in that we do have a chief executive officer. So we balance each other out. And then I also have a fabulous president-elect and a really active board of directors. And I mean, I think everyone who works for CHADD, that works at CHADD, is passionate about the cause and, wants to share information and wants to make a difference. We get a lot of funding from the government. And so we were engaged in lots of different studies, information dissemination. And so kind of I'm up here, and we do have a lot of fabulous people who are in the right places at the right time. We've got an incredible public policy committee that's committed to making a difference, advocating for us on the Hill, ensuring that we get legislation to better support, learners with ADHD everywhere, no matter where you are in the workforce or, college, or, traditional education. It's just a phenomenal group of people. And our international conference, in conjunction with ADA and ACO is quite fabulous. We work a lot with APSARD, so a lot of the clinical experts in ADHD. I pretty much just fangirl the entire time. I'm like, "Ooh, Russell Barkley, hi!" Like, Susan Young, hi. Not very presidential.
I can imagine.
But no, I stay up at the top level a little bit, and I'd like to get involved mostly with the chapter stuff just because that's where my heart is. And then we've got lots of fundraising and things, but we really do have some impressive individuals who all manage their departments really, really well. And I have a great working relationship with our CEO who also has ADHD. And so we've surrounded ourselves with people who don't so that we can get stuff done.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm imagining, a typical workload, and I think this is something a lot of people will have if they've ever, in New Zealand, we have something called Play Centre, and you take your kids there and inevitably you become part of the organization. You have to attend meetings and there's paperwork and things to sign. And so you very quickly become just piled with paperwork, especially, extracurriculars when you have kids. I'm wondering, how do you manage that paperwork? Like, what are you doing? And these days it's more digital than physical, but how are you managing all of those pieces coming at you? Do you have any strategies for that?
The best strategy, and I don't think that my mom intended this to be a positive thing, but, growing up, we would do everything right away. And so either did it the minute that it came in or did something with it, made a decision with it when it came in. Otherwise, it may not happen or something might get in the way of us getting to it. And so I've been able to carry that forward. I need a lot of reminders, so I have lots of reminders set on my calendar. When we were scheduling this, I love all the reminders. If I don't get the reminder from the dentist, if I don't get the reminder about the game, if I don't get the reminder to pick up, the uniform from wherever, it's probably not going to happen. My husband, my partner he's amazing. He's pretty much the executive function for our entire household. And so, we've really developed a great system where we both work 100% of the time, but, we both work in the areas that we work best in. So, he kind of double checks things or follows up. I'll forward an email and he'll let me know what it says if I missed the gist of it. We've got multiple color codes on the calendars. And one of the great things about the pandemic was that more things went digital, and much easier for me to find the field trip permission slip because it was online. Whereas, prior to that, my kids have ADHD. Somewhere from school to the car at pickup, everything disappeared out of the backpack. Or even if it did make it to my car, probably got lost somewhere at home in the giant pile of papers. And so having everything online has been a huge help. I keep everything. I take pictures of everything. So we've got, my 10-year-old pile is here. My other kids are older now and out of the house. So they're mostly responsible for their own stuff, but I do send them reminders and they've set up their own systems as well. All paperwork, like I said, I take a picture of it just so I have a backup copy if I might need it.
That's a very impressive list. That's awesome. Yeah.
I'm sure you guys do the same thing. Or you have something
you need
similar.
A whole toolkit, Like
Right.
Sometimes some things work better for you than others.
Yes. Yeah. And some years are better than others, it depends on what's going on in everybody's life at the time.
Certain weeks. Yeah. I mean, there's really a lot going on for us at all times. Like we're constantly troubleshooting, like, what do I need? Why do I need it? Like, compassion.
Exactly. And I think that's the most important part is that, I know I'm going to drop the ball. I know I'm going to forget something. I'm going to forget that piece of paper. I'm going to be a little bit late, even though I did everything possible to get there on time. And just, recognizing that this is a function of my ADHD. And I've done a really great job of putting systems and structures in place to prevent the big negatives from happening. But sometimes things are still going to happen, and that's just life and it's okay. We used to really beat myself up. And I'm sure you guys have experienced that to some extent when I would forget things, and I would apologize profusely. I'm sure it was ridiculously annoying to whoever I was apologizing to, like for days. A couple of days ago, I'm really sorry. I just want to tell you I'm so sorry again. And I hope you're not mad at me, that kind of thing. And, working with a great therapist and working with an ADHD coach has really helped me kind of reel that back in a little bit. So I still have the rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria in certain situations, but at least now I'm better able to manage it when things do kind of fall off the bus.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we know from the research that we really can struggle with self-criticism growing up. We receive a lot more, even well-meaning, hey, you're doing it a bit differently. Do you want to try it the right way? And that can really lead to self-criticism. So yeah, you make an excellent point. It can be so easy to just go around apologizing.
Yeah. But to be the positive voice again, the mindfulness research sort of supports that awareness of your triggers is the first sign to being able to do anything about it. So yeah, messing up is like sometimes a really great thing because it's like, oh gosh, that was an awful thing I just said about myself. Why did I say that? And then you slowly unravel it.
Exactly. Yeah. Mark Burton changed my life. I was convinced I couldn't do mindfulness. He's a mindfulness expert. And he gave me like a little 30-second thing to say in moments of stress. And it makes a huge difference. It's like recognizing that you're struggling, recognizing that other people struggle with this stuff too, and that it's okay. And it sounds really simple and it makes a huge, huge difference. So that, and like trying to do the, self-care, everyone hates that word now, but trying to be really intentional about making sure I schedule time to exercise so I don't become homicidal, and, making sure that I go to bed on time. But then also I, like most people with ADHD, I don't sleep. I don't sleep well. And 90% of us don't. So again, being kind to myself too, when I'm sitting, my husband will say, just go to sleep. I'm like, thank you. I would love to just go to sleep. But, sitting there reading and sometimes those are great moments, and I'm able to capture things, reading at night quietly that I wouldn't have been able to capture during the day, and, not getting stuck in that negative, oh, I'm a mess today because I didn't sleep. And I may be a mess, but, recognizing that there is some benefit to it.
Yeah, definitely. And, thinking about all this, do you have any recommendations for other women with ADHD trying to navigate in the working world? Because, we were talking about papers on the idea that working, we get diagnosed later, we get misdiagnosed, it can be much harder for us. Yeah. I'm really curious what your thoughts are and what your recommendations are for those women.
So medication, I mean, I'm pro medication. It made a huge difference for me. And I think, a lot of the research also shows that if you do nothing else, if you don't do any coaching or executive skills or executive function skills training, just taking medication makes a massive difference. And I know it's not for everyone. I know it's a personal choice, but there's so many more options now than there were, 15 years ago. Different formulations, different delivery methods, so many different strengths. And then even with the medication shortage, I mean, I think that's been a really kind of excellent example that people need their meds, and because they work. So medication has been huge. Exercise, like I said, has always been, even before getting diagnosed, it wasn't ever to stay in shape. I just knew that if I didn't burn off this excess energy, I would just be angry all the time. In the working world, I don't know how it is there, but here we go back and forth about whether or not to officially disclose. It used to be don't disclose, but ask for, say things like, I work best when I have a quiet environment, or when I have really specific deadlines, or when I have a lot of feedback. And I think it's moving more now towards go ahead and disclose. Before it was don't disclose until you're about to get fired and get yourself some protections. And I don't love that idea. I think it's much better, and I think much more accepted. So many organizations are championing, the neuro-inclusive work environment. And so why not? I love listening to, and I've got young adults now, my kids. I love listening to them talk to their friends about how their ADHD shows up, and advocating for themselves, and having this very relaxed conversation with everyone in the room about what they need to be successful. It's a beautiful thing. And so I'm very hopeful for what comes next for everyone in the workplace.
Yeah. Oh, that's so lovely. Thinking about the fact that your kids are doing that, that gives me a lot of positive, because you're right. That is what we got taught at the beginning, and it's different now, but it's a shift. It's not like everyone's changed. I think it depends on the place. It's still case by case.
No, absolutely. And, it depends on the political environment too, unfortunately. So to be clear, I'm not saying disclose if you're not comfortable disclosing.
Coming tomorrow, be like, Jeremy told me.
President of CHADD said. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are aware of all the things that are, kind of out there in terms of supports. I encourage everyone to try different things and see what works for you, just because, some people really respond to certain things. And then, I might try them and be like, I am not doing that. That is not helpful for me at all. And I find that very stressful. Someone like the timers, putting a timer on to help you keep track of time, that drives me crazy. I hyper focus on it. I've found body doubling has been a huge, huge asset in terms of getting stuff done that I don't like to do. Just sitting next to somebody who's also doing something, or you can do, online body doubling now, which is a little weird, but it still works.
Yeah, we do a lot of body doubling in our academy, and people have found that really great, especially at the beginning. I think when you're still learning skills, just being able to be like, well, we've just got body doubling today and that's going to be it. And that's good enough.
Exactly. And sometimes that's enough, And I think kind of what you were saying, Sarah, too, a little bit about forgiveness, forgiving kind of yourself, when you mess up, forgiving the people who don't maybe understand ADHD and make snarky comments, or, unwittingly even say things that are hurtful, people who know you and people who don't know you. And sometimes it's about forgiving our kids, and forgiving our parents. Because if our parents had ADHD and we have ADHD and our kids have ADHD, probably didn't have a lot of great role models. And I know, at least from my growing up experience, lots of challenges with emotional regulation kind of throughout the whole family. And so when I became a parent, I know I'm kind of dovetailing into something else entirely here, but, it was hard. I had to take parenting classes because I knew what I was doing was not helping, and I did not want to be that parent. And so, if you are a working mom with ADHD and you've got kids at home with ADHD, sign up for those parenting classes for how to parent kids with ADHD. In particular, if you are a parent who has ADHD, it makes a huge difference, because I can change me, but I can't change anybody else.
Yeah. And you're actually perfectly segueing into what we were going to talk about next, which is great, which is, 5 kids. First of all, I just want to know, what does your morning routine look like? Just take me through what is happening in the morning, as much as you're comfortable sharing. I really want to know.
So we're actually in a pretty good place right now, because, like I said, my older 4, like the first 4 were really close together. So they're only one of them's in the house right now. So, and they all, take care of themselves. So my kids are 26, 23, 20, 18. And then we have a surprise child. We have a 10-year-old. Getting the 10-year-old out, and he has ADHD and autism. The 10-year-old does. And getting him ready in the morning is much easier than it was to get, the older 4 out the door in the morning. And we know a lot more now. So it's, in fact, we didn't even realize he had ADHD because we'd created such an accommodative lifestyle at home to help with everybody else. But yeah, it was insanity. There was times when I would get one of the kids refused to get up in time to get dressed. And so we would get them, we'd either put them to bed in their uniforms the night before. And I remember carrying 2 of them down the stairs and kind of chucking them in the car. We had toothbrushes in the car so people could brush their teeth on the way to school. We would get up early to give the kids their meds and then let them sleep for another 30 minutes so that when they woke up, their meds would already be kicked in. So the morning would go better. There were several days where, we didn't want to mess with homework challenges the night before because the meds had already worn off, and it was just going to be 4 hours of pulling teeth. And so, we knew that if we woke them up early in the morning and gave them the meds early, and then they got up and everything was kind of firing, they could do their math homework on the way to school in 10 minutes instead of 4 hours, fighting the night before. It was insane. We had the kind of a landing zone and a launch pad area. So everything went in the same spot when you got home. And when you were ready to leave the next day, you either put it, or the night before preferably, I would put the backpacks up against the door so you couldn't open the door without tripping over the backpack, or I'd put them in the car so that everything was there. But even then, there were still definitely mornings where there was yelling, and I hated those days because, you feel like you started your kid's day, not on the best note. But many of those times were times when I didn't allow myself enough time to get myself ready in the morning. So then I had to make sure I was walking the walk and getting my outfit for the next day picked out, or making sure at least I had something clean and putting my, whatever I needed for the day in the car, so I didn't even have to remember to go get it or trip over it on the way out the door. But also recognizing that, the whole part about negative consequences and kids with ADHD made a huge difference, that negative consequences don't help at all. And then remembering that 3 to 5 year developmental delay, kids with ADHD are 3 to 5 years behind their same age peers in at least one or two kind of major developmental areas. And so, anytime where I would find myself getting repeatedly upset or frustrated, that is the one thing that would help me go, okay, he looks like he's 13, but functionally he may be like 8 in this area. And so, how would I manage a second grader? And thankfully, since we had so many kids, I usually had a second grader that I could go, okay, how would I handle it? But that was a huge help, because it just reminded me that, we just need a little more time, a little extra attention and accommodation. But yeah, it was chaos. We were not perfect by any means. And I think if anybody is listening, please hear this. There's nothing that we did that was, perfect all the time, or if ever. We made a lot of mistakes. There were definitely days where I came home and just had to apologize to everyone because I yelled that morning or last night, on the way to school. And my husband would too. We work really hard to not yell, because we both grew up in environments where the parents yelled a lot, and that was not very helpful. So we try to not yell. So thankfully, I think we've come a long way, but there was a lot of learning to do. Because I think one of the most frustrating things about being a parent with ADHD and having a kid with ADHD is that sometimes, you're not as empathetic as people think you would be. Their ADHD may in some ways trigger you, because there were times when, if I'd worked really hard to be on time, or worked really hard to make sure we got something done at a specific time, and then my kid didn't, even though we walked through all the things together, that would really frustrate me. It would be very challenging to find grace when our ADHDs kind of matched up. We're similar in presentation. Yeah. We actually annoy each other more than we do if we have. Yeah, all my kids have combined type ADHD, and so do I. So it's very kind of fun to figure that piece out.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm just listening, just like taking it all in, just trying to, I've got like a 2-year-old and a 8-month-old. The audience is very sick of hearing you say that. But it's just so good to hear that, that developmental delay thing. I think it's so important. I think we don't, I actually work with people in their 30s who are like, I can't believe I'm only here and I'm 30. And we sort of forget a little bit to give ourselves grace for that when we're older, and also with our kids when they are younger. I think that's such an important piece to remember.
Yeah. And I think it's challenging too, particularly when they're in high school, because it's harder to, you see, like my kids are all tall. So even my 18-year-old, he's 6'3", he's a lifeguard. So, he's in great shape, crazy smart, but his executive function skills are significantly lacking. But if, his teachers look at him and are like, he should be able to do this. And even, for my husband and I, we sometimes think he should be able to do this. And of course, when you're saying a should, it's based on something that's no longer true. So you have to take that step back. But, we're just, I guess, wired in some ways to forget about those invisible challenges that we can't see. So I have to remind myself there too. But I think when it's easier for an elementary school kid or, a preschool kid, I think, for us to see the disconnect, but much, much more challenging as they get older. And all the research now is showing that, we may be 32 before our brain completely catches up. Doesn't mean that we're not, getting closer all the time, but if you're 30 and you're like, gosh, dang it, why can't I get this? Have hope, because your brain is still growing.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite funny. I think I started this organization around 30.
Really?
32. That's so funny. But it is true. And I think, when we stop measuring people's reading age, for example, it's it's a lot harder to tell. And it is interesting. I appreciate you sharing the piece about emotional regulation as well, because as part of researching for this interview, we did come across some paper on, that idea that we can struggle more with, how we communicate with our kids if we have ADHD and, executive functioning emotional regulation around that kind of thing. And it was a little bit confronting, honestly, to read that, because you don't want to kind of have that conversation. It can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
As I was listening to you talk earlier about your own experience, it was sounding to me like parenting is a lot of swallowing your pride.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Am I reading that right? Because that's sort of what it sounded like.
Swallowing something. You're just like...
swallowing something. Just a bunch of words. Emotions, as it turns out.
Yeah. But also regulation. I imagine, I am curious, like once over time, I imagine you must have developed some, you mentioned mindfulness and things like that. What are the things that you did, around emotional regulation outside of obviously apologizing, because that
gets
completely
easier,
valid
right?
as well.
Right. I mean, yeah. Just different. I mean, really, the exercise thing is huge, at least for me, because I'm more likely to lose my temper or to respond negatively emotionally if I haven't burned off that energy. But yeah, it's a lot of, admitting that I don't know what I'm doing, and I know that what I'm doing isn't working. And I'm sorry that I don't know what to do differently, but I will find out and get back to you. So there's definitely a lot of that. I mean, you're right, though. Knowing the things that make you upset, and trying to structure around those things is helpful too. Like if I know I don't like to be late, I don't like to have to rush around or get lost or forget things. And so there's some perfectionism in there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so doing my best, to put things in place ahead of time so that doesn't happen is helpful. But I mean, there's still times where, you're going to lose it. And even the best laid plans, like they say. And then back to what we were saying about forgiveness, thankfully my husband and I rarely lose it at the same time. And Sky, I remember when our kids were that little, and there were just sometimes where, I would be like, I can't right now, and he would take one of the kids, and I just needed we were really good about honoring that and not challenging that in each other. Like, why can't you just do it right now? What's going on? Just taking the kid and going someplace else. And even if it was just for 5 minutes, just a minute to kind of center and breathe, and say, okay, what kind of parent do I want to be right now? We do a really powerful exercise at work on, envisioning your life 20 years from now, and your kids are home with their partners or with their kids, and maybe it's a holiday and you're all sitting around the table and talking about what it was like to grow up in your house, and what do you want your kids to say. And I cry every time I think about it. And, when I do,
gosh,
because there were times when I was afraid of what they would say. I would love for them to say that they grew up in an environment where they felt loved and supported and cared for, and even if mistakes were made, it was okay, and they got to be who they really were inside. And when we were first starting out as parents, things were very different. We grew up in a generation where, corporal punishment was a thing, and yelling was a thing, and so if we hadn't taken steps to learn the skills that we've learned, I'm sure that, I don't know what our kids are going to say, but I'm hoping that they're going to say something that's a little bit better and different than what they would have said if we hadn't taken the initiative to learn how to parent differently.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure. Great. Well, I just have a few more questions for you that we ask everyone, which is, can you tell us about one professional achievement that you're the most proud of?
Getting my master's in social work at 50. Pretty proud of that.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. What made you decide to do it at that point? Because I imagine there's that feeling the longer you go, you're like, you don't have to necessarily. So what made you want to do it?
Well, I wanted to diagnose adults formally with ADHD. And so I did have to get a license of some sort. And I love the holistic and strengths-based approach of social work. And I'm a big proponent of social justice and advocacy. I do a lot of work with justice-involved individuals and people who are struggling with substance use disorder. And that just seemed like the natural path. So, yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm very, very proud of that. Yeah.
Very cool. And on the other side, is there a professional failure that embarrasses you, and how did you deal with it?
There's so many.
Everyone says that.
I think they really are good. I'm glad. I mean, everything from forgetting people's names, who I obviously know them and know their name, and it's just somehow lost. And in that moment, you just are like, I you don't want to ask them. And I haven't figured out how to handle that, to be honest. I've tried all kinds of different things, but I've been fired from jobs, and that's awful. That was devastating. And it took a lot of work to kind of recognize that, what was behind the reasons that I got fired from those jobs, and what part was mine and what part was, really a result of ADHD, and what I needed to know or learn differently, and kind of how to forgive myself and them because some of them were not justified, I feel like. But that took a lot of work, especially when you grow up like I did, my professional image of myself was kind of everything, and those moments were really painful.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you sharing that. Mm-hmm. And what about your favorite dopamine activity on that slightly lighter note? What do you like to do?
Online shopping. Hello. I mean, not my healthiest dopamine activity, but add to cart.
That's awesome.
I'm sure I need everything. I need all the things that I ordered.
Yeah.
Any hobbies right now that you've got like carts full?
Oh my gosh, yes. Embarrassing. I'm addicted to these puzzles they're called Liberty puzzles. They're like wooden, and they're all fun little shapes, and everything is, they're all works of art. And I'm shamelessly, I have way more puzzles than I should. There's definitely times where my kids are like, "Mom, oh my gosh, what are you doing?" I'm like, hang on. I'm almost done. I just have to find this. It's terrible. That's my embarrassing hobby.
I can tell you right now, there's going to be about 100 people are going to Google Liberty puzzles right now, because that always happens when we discuss dopamine activities. No, it's great.
Please send me free puzzles, Liberty.
Me right now.
My last question is, if you had an ADHD life motto, if you had to pick one, what would it be?
I don't know if it's a life motto or if it's a Russell Barkley quote. It's that ADHD is the most treatable chronic condition in the world. And so if you get diagnosed, it is incredibly treatable. There's hope, there's options, you may have this for your entire life, but it doesn't have to have you. There's so many different ways to live with ADHD and live and thrive successfully. And so I don't know if that translates into a motto that's catchy, but
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your ADHD skills with us today. Where can people find out about you and what you do?
Yeah, CHADD.org. Come and check us out. We've got all kinds of amazing free information on our website. You can become a member if you'd like, but we give away a lot of free stuff. So CHADD.org, no matter where you are in the world. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, likewise. I think this is going to be amazing. I think a lot of people will have gotten a lot out of this.
I hope so.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to reach out or connect with us, you can leave us a message at admin@unconventionalorganization.com.
You can also find out more about our ADHD coaching organization, read our free articles, or sign up to our online courses at unconventionalorganization.com. That's organization with a Z or an S. They both will get you there.
If you'd like to learn more about what we discussed here today, or you want to read the transcript, you can find that at our show notes page at unconventionalorganization.com.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and think someone else might find the strategies and stories helpful, the best thing you can do is share episodes using the share button in the podcast player, or leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or your podcast player of choice, letting them know why you've benefited from this podcast.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back in the ADHD Lab next week.